So I hope you enjoyed the project so far. So just a quick recap, we purchased this bike a little over a year ago. It wasn't running. I thought it'd be a nice project to attempt an EV conversion on. So I've had this bike stripped down to every nut and bolt and refurbished it and repainted and replaced anything it needed replacing. So it's got all new bearings, new seals, sprockets, chain, seats have been recovered, and all the controls. So the bike's as good as new. We've also had the box to hold the batteries and the supporting frame engineered and approved by TMR to replace the supporting engine that used to be in the bike. We've put a new fairing kit on, so you would have seen videos and photos of the new fairing kit to see what the end product's going to look like. We have installed the batteries to make sure everything fits. We have mocked up the controls and basically wired everything in to make sure everything is going to fit into position. Then I pulled it all apart again and had painted up the box and the frame structure and fitted it back into the bike and tensioned everything into place. So the frame and the box is now permanently fitted. So the next thing we've got to do is fit the batteries back into the bike. We know they're going to fit, but we've got to make sure once they're finally installed that there's no movement. All the terminals are tensioned correctly, they're correctly connected to the BMS, and once the lid goes on, nothing's going to move. So let's get started. Alright, so we're going to start with the bottom row of batteries. So obviously there's welds inside the box, so we've got to pack the batteries away so the batteries don't come in contact with those welds. So I'm packing the batteries up with this high density rubber, which is self-adhesive and sticks together. And so when the batteries go in, the batteries are sitting up well clear of any of the welds around the bottom and also from the welds around the side. So we'll be packing it in from the sides as well. So yeah, we'll just pack the rubber in so that we get the batteries in nice and tight and there's no movement. Alright, so we've got the BMS on the board here, so we've just siliconed the BMS to the board, even though it is screwed on as well, just to make sure it doesn't come loose in the battery compartment. My two options for connecting the BMS wires to the battery, one is to just put a lug under the nut, but there's already not a lot of thread there once the nut goes down, and I'd like as much thread as possible. And also tightening down onto a lug may create a problem with it coming loose, so I'm opting to fix a lug, just bolting through and actually putting another lug on. That way I can get my maximum connection with the battery bolts and still have a good connection for the BMS to connect to. So now I've got to make up 20 of those. Alright, so we're getting all the links fitted for the new lug to go on. So we're putting a 4.5mm draw bit through, then using a 10mm to countersink it a bit, then smooth it over with the countersinking tool. And then we're putting a thread in it, and then we end up just screwing it, and that's the final product. So yep, by the time we do 21 of those we'll be sick of it, but yeah, so end up with a lug like that. Alright, so we've got all the links made up now with the separate screw for the BMS. Had a couple of questions about, do these batteries expand? I've spoken to the suppliers and they have told me that these batteries are unlikely to expand at all, but I'm thinking I might put some foam instead of the heavy rubber on the side. So I've got some high density foam as well, which will make them still pretty tight, but it will give them room to move in case there is any expansion. But they said they're unlikely to expand at all with these types of batteries. And also they recommended putting some HDPE plastic in between each of the batteries. So I've got hold of some of that, so we'll cut that up and we'll have another look at how they're going to fit in the box. Might pull some of the rubber out and put some high density foam in instead. Alrighty, so the outer casing of these batteries is actually metal. It's the positive part of the battery, and the plastic coating is fairly thin. It's a bit of a scratch there, and I was able to put my meter on it and go between the casing and the negative terminal and get the battery voltage. So I need to make sure that these do not come in contact with any metal, otherwise the batteries will short out on each other. So we've got the plastic to go in between them, and we'll also need to ensure that all these joints are actually covered up. Like I've built it up so it's past them, but I'm going to add some more rubber in there that'll actually cover all of these joints to ensure that nothing ever comes in contact with it. So we'll get that done now. So there we go, no more welds. So we've covered up all the welds well and truly, so there's no chance of a battery ever coming in contact with any of the parts of the box. So now I'm confident that we can move ahead and not have any problems with the batteries. Okay, so the batteries go in, and they're pretty reasonably tight, but they do have foam around them for a little bit of expansion. But down in this corner here, the welds are pretty close to the number 1 battery, and it shouldn't ever touch it because there's a bit of room there, but I'm still not happy with it. So I'm going to pull the rubber out around that weld and just take the top off it a bit, because it's not going to affect the structure of the box. I've just taken all the bumpy bits off the weld so that I can ensure that I can cover that properly and the batteries won't come in contact with it. Alrighty, so I've gone around all 4 corners of the box down in the bottom section, and could see that there's a few welds that had just little raised sections that weren't going to affect the structure of the box or anything by taking them off. So we've removed all those just so we don't have any little bits sticking up that can wear through the rubber into the battery. So now we can put all the rubber back in and check how they fit. Alright, I've spent a lot of time getting this right, batteries in and out multiple times, checking everything. Can't get this wrong. This has got to be right the first time. So now I am 100% happy that these batteries will be secured. They've got little tiny bit of room to move, but they are in firm. And they've got all the insulation in between each of the batteries, insulation all around the side, so there can be no chance of contact between the batteries and the case or each other. And so I'm going to leave them in there now, I'm not pulling them out again. So next thing is to see how the rest of the batteries are going to fit and start wiring it all up. Okay, so that's the test fit completed. All the batteries are in position. They're a good fit. There's very little movement there. We've got foam on the sides to allow for any expansion. The insulating material is in between each of the batteries. There's a couple of spots within the box where there's about a 6mm gap between a terminal and the outer casing, but once these batteries are locked into position and the lid goes down, the box would have to be severely deformed before you would have any chance of anything coming in contact between the batteries and the metal box. So we'll start by connecting up the bottom row of batteries, and then we'll move to the top. Okay, so now we're going to put in the links and the BMS. So I've numbered all the BMS leads so I know where they're going to go. And we're putting the links down into the batteries. Now I've looked up online between 5 and 7 Newton meters. So we've got the tension wrench sent to 6, so they go in between, and that should give us the right tension so the nut shouldn't never come loose on the batteries. Okay, so I've made a start. We've got the BMS sitting in there, and that's connected to battery number 1. We've connected a couple of batteries down on the one side underneath the BMS and put some protective rubber and stuff there, so there's no chance of anything moving and shorting on anything. We've left this side disconnected until we get the other side connected first, just to make it a bit safer. Now we can do this side easily because we can get to it and continue working our way through the battery pack. Okay, so we've got the bottom row of batteries in, it's got the BMS all connected, we've got rubber over the terminals to protect anything from rubbing. Not that anything's going to move any of the rub anyway, but we're putting protective rubber over everything anyway. So we've got the bottom 7 batteries in. We've got covers on all of our cables so we don't get any accidental arcing, because I had one little spark and that was enough for me. So now we're just going to put some rubber over these terminals and then start laying in the top row of 14 batteries. There we go, we got the top row of batteries and we're starting to connect them up. I did up the terminals on the far side before pushing them in because they're slightly under the edge of the box, so I put the tension wrench on them properly, and the rest of them should be able to get to. It doesn't matter if I touch the box because the box isn't connected to the batteries in any way, so there's no potential between the batteries and the box. But still got to be careful not to drop nuts and things down in between fittings, because that will create a spark and we don't want that. So we'll keep putting it all together, and then we can link up all of the BMS wires, and we may even be able to get the BMS to fire up. Alright, so there we go. So I've got all the joining links in. So we've got 52 point something volts in the top pack, and can't remember what the bottom pack was, but yeah, don't like bolting these things in. It's pretty scary, but yeah, just got to take your time, don't drop anything. Alright, so I forgot to take a little video of the bottom row of batteries before I started putting everything on top. So we have tied everything up down there so it's not going to move around, all the wires down the bottom there. Over the second row of terminals down the bottom we've placed some rubber and then put the wires for the BMS on top of that so that there's no rubbing against anything. And now we are going to connect up the BMS wires to the top row of batteries. Alright, so I didn't think it was necessary to show you how to connect every little wire up, but yeah, you got to keep your wits about you, because I've mounted the wire for each battery midway on a link. So the plus battery 10 plus, got to make sure I connect it on that one and not over on this one, so to speak. So yep, just got to keep remembering what I've done so I don't accidentally put the wrong wire on the wrong link. So the next one we're going to do is battery 14. So we'll find wire 14 that we have labelled here, which we checked and double checked before we put them all out and started cutting them off where I can't see the wires where they come out of the BMS anymore. So we just put a little bit of slack on the wire, so I want to cut him off there like that. Double check we do have 14, yep. Now I've got a set of strippers, about that much. And let's give it a few twists. Then we can put the lug on. A good firm fit so they're not going to come out in a hurry. Stick the cable through just a little bit. Crimpers. Okay, so that's a nice tight crimp. I'll just put a number on it, number 14. There we go, 14. Now we can mount that onto the battery, and we want to put a spring washer on it. And this one's probably the worst one to show because it's very tight to get into. That on there, and then I'll go get the other spanner and tighten it up. So basically that's how we're connecting them on. So tighten that down nice. So this allows us to ensure we've got the correct tension on each of the battery studs and doesn't interfere with the lug we're putting in for the BMS. If I was to put the lug under battery nut, then I can't guarantee I've got the right tension and that the battery terminal may not come loose. So this is the way I prefer to do it, and I think in the end it'll give us a better result. Alrighty, so here we are. We have got the batteries finally connected. So we've got the BMS sitting down the front there. All the batteries are connected. They're fitted in correctly into the battery compartment. All the links are connected. All the nuts have been tensioned. We've double checked all the wires going back to the BMS. I've added a little stud on these links just so that I know that when I do up the nuts on the batteries that they are correct. If I was a little bit concerned that if I put a lug under there's not a lot of thread on them anyway, but the lug could affect how they're tensioned and could allow the batteries to come loose. So I've opted to put the extra stud on. I think that's a better option, and then I'm sure that these nuts are biting into the copper bar nice and they're not going to come loose at any time. So they're all connected now. We have got a tablet here that connects to the BMS, and we have got a little 2-inch screen up here, and on the side of the 2-inch screen it's got a little start button which should kick the BMS into life. So the start button is connected through a little hole in the side of the box which we put in, so it's a plug that connects in the box which goes into the BMS. So I think it's now time to give it a try. So once we press this start button we should hear a bip, and that'll be the BMS starting up. So we have got 65% battery. Alrighty, so the BMS has already been pre-programmed, so we know that's right because we've had these batteries connected before. But it's just a matter of getting them in the bike and getting them connected correctly and for the final time. So yeah, the screen goes off, but it does stay on when the batteries are under load. So while I'm riding it's going to stay on, but when it's in this mode the screen only stays on for about 5-10 seconds or something, and then it cycles back off again. Alright, so we have got our tablet here and we've got the BMS app loaded, so we're just going to tap on that and go into the BMS. Let's tap on that and it should connect us. BMS is chirping, so we are connected. So we've got 78.26 volts. You can see all the batteries are working there correctly. So it says now it's starting to balance the load. And at the moment I've got, you can't tell, but the discharge I've got turned off, because I didn't want the batteries actually connecting to anything until I'm ready for it. So I can turn that on and off just by putting in the password and manipulating that button. So at the moment we've got the output from the BMS up top here, but there's nothing that's not connected to the positive. So if you put something between the positive and negative, from the positive terminal down here to the negative terminal, there'll be nothing coming out of the BMS at this stage. I didn't want any little accidents, or in this case with this many batteries it'll be a big accident. We don't want that either. So now that we've got it all going and it's working, we know it's operating, so we can now tidy up all these wires, and we're going to put some rubber over the top of the whole thing and then put some strips in that will hold the batteries into place. We've also got a couple of pieces to go in here that will hold the batteries from moving forward and backwards, and also hold the bottom row of batteries and the BMS in position. So we'll start putting all of that in now. So we'll tidy up these wires and start measuring up for all the pieces of packing we need to hold the batteries down once the lid goes on. So let's move to that.